I've had this strange ability ever since I was a kid. I used to ask my parents about it, but they never seemed to see what I was talking about. No matter who I asked, they always looked at me funny and told me what an overactive imagination I had. None of them seemed to see what I could see, and I quickly learned not to bring it up. It's hard not to bring it up, though, when you're surrounded by it at all times. You see, I could see the connections between people. The people who believed me always asked what it was like, but it's honestly hard to explain. It's not like a string, but that's the closest I can come to describing it. I think of a small, colorful string that's attached to someone else, something unbreakable that ordinary people pass through without interrupting. I learned in high school that there were certain people I had to avoid, because the number of strings attached to them would make my head hurt. There was a girl, one of those super popular girls that every high school seems to have, who almost seemed to glow with the number of strings and cords that came off of her, moving in every direction. She was a glowing ball of reds and greens and blues and yellows and oranges, and if I looked at her for too long, I would develop the worst migraine as I tried to follow all those different strings. The different colors tell you something you need to know about everyone. The red string was for love, but it could also be for infatuation or plain old lust. In high school, I would often use these colors to tell my friends which people liked them, which kicked off many an unwise relationship. Don't get me wrong, a few of them used the information to craft wonderful relationships, even marriages, but it led my friend Tyler to date a girl who went on to stalk him for years to come. Blue strings were for friendship, something that often helped me to find friends and see the connections between others, something I used to make friends with people by befriending their friends. Green was for envy, orange was for hate, yellow was for deception. I used this information to help alleviate some rather hectic situations in my life, and it kept me out of trouble more often than not. As a young person in high school, however, the red string was the one that mattered the most to me. Like all teens, I was a bundle of hormones and emotions that were constantly at odds with each other. I wanted a girlfriend, a companion, someone to be with me and make me feel wanted. I wanted a lover who would sate my sexual desires, something I was always very aware of. Like all adolescents, these desires were often at odds with each other, and sometimes even thwarted each other. Girls who wanted to sleep with me were often put off by my appearance of being clingy. Girls who wanted a relationship were often pushed away by my supposed want of only one thing. I became frustrated, and some of this was spurred on by the fact that I could see these strings. You see, I only approached girls who presented a connection to me by that tried and true red string. The darker the red, the more they usually liked me, and I've watched that string grow lighter and lighter again and again before finally falling off as I drive them away with my warring desires. Sometimes I think the strings actually hurt me, making me confident, but also making me aware that I couldn't mess it up. I would stumble into these encounters and ultimately be pushed aside when my behavior or cockiness ultimately drove them away. Until one day, when I woke up and found a heartstring. I told you about the red strings, but the heartstrings were a little different. They were as red as arterial blood, and they only connected people who were meant to be together. Normally, they took time to build, but sometimes you would see two people connected by a heartstring who had yet to meet. When you hear about love at first sight, that's often what they're talking about, but they are extremely rare to find. I woke up one morning, about 2 weeks after my 17th birthday, to find a heartstring leading out of my bedroom. I was confused at first. After the last girl I had clumsily run off with my careless teen advances, she had told the school that I was kind of a creep. Now many of the female students would no longer talk to me. I hadn't even seen a red string in nearly 3 months, so to suddenly wake up with a blood red string was unthinkable. I had no girlfriend. I didn't even have any female friends that would speak to me, and now suddenly I could see this heartstring protruding from my chest, stretching out into the world. It took everything I had to eat some breakfast, get dressed, and shoulder my bag so I could head to school. I just knew it was going to be a great day. I followed the red string on my normal route. I believed it was someone at school, so this seemed the best way to find them. I had no reason to doubt this. School held most of the people my age that I knew. It could be someone new, someone who had been sick and didn't know about the rumors that had circulated, or even someone who found themselves smitten with me despite those rumors. I remember forming a picture of them in my mind, this homunculus becoming an amalgamation of the things I liked in a partner. Green eyes, straight black hair, glasses, maybe a little on the chubby side, an easy smile, and on and on and on. When the string diverted, going towards town instead, I stopped and looked a little anxious. The string was heading into the business district, and I could hear the bell ringing nearby, letting me know that I had about 5 minutes to get to class before I was late. I'd been dragging my feet, daydreaming all the way to school, and the deviation was not something I had planned for. Did I go to school and hope the person was just running late, or did I go looking for what could very well be the love of my life? What if they were only in town for a few hours? What if I missed this chance forever because I was too afraid to break a rule? As the bell for class echoed out, I turned and headed into town. I was already late. It was a little longer. I followed the string up the street, my tennis shoes slapping against the pavement, as I again slipped into a daydream about who I was going to meet. Maybe she was a homeschool girl who was out with her parents. Maybe they were traveling, and our meeting would spark a long-distance relationship that would become something closer later. Maybe, my adolescent mind almost fantasized, it was an older woman who would be taken with me and begin a secret romance. Not too much older, of course. In my mind, she would be 19 or 20, maybe even 21, someone who could take me to parties and concerts and buy me beer as we fell into a whirlwind romance. Teens never think these things through, doing most of their thinking with what's below the belt, and my excitement was building with each step I took. The string led me through the business district, and when it led me towards the industrial park, I stopped and glanced around. Who would be waiting for me here? Was it take your daughter to work day at some factory? If I got caught in there, it would be trouble. Hell, I could have been in trouble for truancy if the officers had caught me walking the streets during school hours. I looked back towards school, thinking it might be time to head back. If I left now, I would only be a little bit late. Only in a little bit of trouble. I might miss first period, but I could still go to my other classes, making up some excuse as to what had taken me so long. I looked towards the smoking factory that lay just across the street, shaking my head as I walked towards it. I would feel at the time that it was an experience too important to miss. I wish now that I had. I might have kept my innocence. I skirted the factory, getting some looks from men with lunch pails and men in ties, but the string didn't lead me there. I walked past a shiny office park, some construction firm or another, but the string led me past that as well. I walked past a concrete plant, a shipping depot, and stopped again as I came even with a long warehouse of unknown purpose. I was looking at a broken and derelict building that had once been a manufacturing plant of some kind for computer parts. The windows were broken eyes that stared out onto the sidewalk, and the doors hung open like the mouth of a waiting carnival funhouse. I didn't want to go into that building, but that was where the string was leading me. I took one hesitant step after another as I approached the husk. I was inside before I started noticing the drops of blood on the floor. The string was trailing the drops like a dutiful hound, and I felt less and less sure that I wanted to know who or where it was taking me. Who would I find in here? Why would they possibly be the love of my life? Was I meant to save them from something? My mind treated me to some sort of hero fantasy, where I would come across my love being menaced by a killer, and know just what to do in order to save her. She would have fled him after he cut her, hence the blood, and I would arrive just in time to save her life, but not before I knocked the villain out with a pipe and proved that I was a real man who could protect her. It's funny, the gymnastics our brains go through sometimes. The blood drops led to a stairwell that went down into the shadowy underbelly of the building. The blood droplets didn't look too bad, maybe a bloody nose or a slight cut, and I took out my phone then and used the light to follow them. I tried to be quiet, but I knew that my footsteps had to be nearly as loud as my breathing, a mixture of ragged fear and hesitant excitement. When I peeked around the edge of the stairwell, I could see hulking machinery that had probably once kept this place running. Generators, old equipment, broken furniture, they all looked like monsters waiting to jump out and get me. But as I stood shivering in that near darkness, I heard something that reminded me of my purpose. A liquid-filled cough came from the back of the basement. I snuck in, my shoes grinding onto sand and broken glass as I made my way towards them. The basement had little windows at street level, and the light that came in illuminated everything but the darker areas. The soup in between the machines was permeable only by my phone light, and I checked them as I went for hiding beasts waiting to ambush me. I heard a wet, racking cough and sped up a little bit, not wanting to be too late to save her in my caution. She was waiting for me, and I didn't want to let her down. She was at the end, her body in a beam of sunlight as she lay dying. She was a mess. Her clothes had been ripped and torn, parts of her on display that had certainly been part of my fantasies, though never like this. She had been about my age, 16 or 17, but I didn't know her. She was leaking blood from dozens of wounds on her face and chest, and her arms looked like ripped open Christmas packages as they hung in bloody tatters. She was leaking other things too, and it was pretty clear that killing her hadn't been enough for him. She looked at me with a mixture of fear and confusion as I approached her, and I told her that I wasn't going to hurt her as I took my phone out and dialed 911. As the operator picked up, though, a shadow fell across us, and I suddenly looked up to see someone looking down from the window at street level. He had clearly placed her here so he could get one more look before leaving, and I saw him in profile now, though the sun made his features hard to make out. He was either an adult or an exceptionally large teen, and he was wearing a ball cap and a jumpsuit that zipped up. There was a logo on the jumpsuit, but I didn't have time to read it before he just took off towards wherever he was going. The operator called out to ask if I was still there, and I quickly gave her my information and told her where I was and what had happened. I gave her the best description of the guy that I could, and when the girl's hand tried to fumble into mine, I took it and squeezed it reassuringly. I wanted to let her know that she had to hold on, she would be important to me, and that she had to stay alive because we had so much more to experience together. In my mind, I could already see her recovery as I stayed by her side, the two of us bonding over her trauma. I would be the man who had saved her, and as she healed, I would be there for her. I'd be by her side when they caught the guy, giving her my strength as she sat in court. We'd be married, we'd have children of our own, and we'd protect them against people like that. And one day we'd grow old together as I looked down and saw the string falling apart, the filaments unraveling, as she took her last breath and died in that place. I also saw something I had never seen before, something I would see more often than I wanted to after that day. It was a black string, a midnight cord that seemed to undulate with want, that stretched out the window and to the man who had severed my heartstring. It seemed I had lost my love, but gained something far more intimate. I didn't know what it meant, but that black string filled me with dread. I was still contemplating it when the police arrived. Good evening, everyone. It's me, Dr. Plague. Thank you so much for joining me for tonight's story. I hope you enjoyed Strings because it's part 1 of a 4-parter I'm working on. We'll see our protagonist learn a little bit more about the black string, and maybe about the connection it has to the man who killed the woman he loved. So, without further ado, let's thank our sponsors. Thanks to Leslie Lou Riddle for being our Spooky Skeleton tier contributor. Thanks, Leslie. We just couldn't do it without you. If you too would like to support the show, come on down to Patreon. For just $5 a month, you too can join our Spooky Skeleton army and have your name read out at the end of every YouTube and every TikTok that I make. There's a new tier going up if any of you would be interested. For $10 a month, you get everything in my Spooky Skeleton tier, and also receive a free copy of my book every time I produce one, signed and sent to your mailbox. I write, on average, about 2 books a year, so you'll get at least 2 signed copies of a book every year. If Patreon's not really your thing, you can always come to Amazon and buy a copy of my book yourself. We've been reading from Dark Vortex for my Wednesday story, so you can always pick up your own copy and read along with us. It'll be like a little book club. Should be a lot of fun. Or you can always check out our new playlists. I've assembled Internet Nightmares, and we're working our way through Dark Vortex. I've also got some holiday stories up there if, you're feeling nostalgic for holidays gone past. And as always, thanks for stopping by. Dr. Plague, signing off. Have a wonderful evening.